So, how did we end up with the power to wipe out the entire planet with the push of a button? Well, it all started with a few scientists who had, let's say, a bit too much free time. And of course a strong track record of winning Nobel Prizes for, well, pretty much anything but bomb making. You see, by 1939, scientists had already started whispering about the fact that splitting atoms might be a little more than just a cool science experiment. It could actually be ridiculously explosive. So naturally, in the 1940s, the US government decided it would be a fantastic idea to build the most powerful bomb in human history. They called it the Manhattan Project, which, despite the name, had absolutely nothing to do with overpriced Manhattan real estate and everything to do with turning entire cities into, well, nothing. I could, of course, explain why they named it that, but honestly, that's about as exciting as watching paint dry. Cool name, though. Oh, and Trinity? That was the code name for the first time they actually blew one up, because what else would you call your first step toward the apocalypse? The good news? It ended World War II. The bad news? Hiroshima, Nagasaki? Gone. The more bad news? We'd invented a way to wipe out humanity, which wasn't exactly a long-term win for any of us. But of course, it wouldn't be fun if only one country had nukes. Enter the Soviet Union, who in 1949 tested their own bomb, starting the most dangerous pissing contest in history, the nuclear arms race. From there, the US and USSR went nuclear crazy, stockpiling enough bombs to blow up the planet several times over. Because clearly, one apocalypse isn't enough, and to make absolutely sure our shiny new toys could do the job, we naturally needed to test them. A lot. Hundreds of times. First in the Nevada desert, and then in the Pacific Ocean. Because really, who needs an unspoiled paradise when you can have a radioactive crater instead? The logic was simple. Let's blow up remote places because who's gonna miss them? Except, spoiler alert, radiation travels. Turns out you can't just drop a megaton bomb and keep the fallout in a neat little box. And of course, we need to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, also known as the time the world came this close to turning into a radioactive wasteland because of, well, the usual reason: bad neighborly relations. The Soviets thought it would be a brilliant idea to park missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coast. Why? Well, with the US having missiles in Turkey and the Bay of Pigs fiasco still stinging, they figured it was time to even the score. It's like your neighbor putting a giant cannon on their lawn aimed directly at your house. Understandably, the US wasn't thrilled. For 13 excruciating days, John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev played what can only be described as the most dangerous game of chicken in human history. At one point, a US destroyer dropped depth charges near a Soviet sub, and the commander nearly launched a nuke. Thankfully, a sensible officer stepped in with, "How about we don't end the world today?" With missiles locked and loaded and humanity hanging by a thread, or a really dumb decision, diplomacy ultimately prevailed. No missiles were launched, allowing us to delay the much-feared nuclear winter for the time being. But the Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't the only time we flirted with nuclear disaster. In 1983, things almost went nuclear again. The Soviets had a new early warning system, and one night it decided to throw a little false alarm. The system reported that 5 US missiles were heading straight for Moscow. The officer in charge, Stanislav Petrov, had minutes to decide whether to retaliate. Now, most people in his shoes might have panicked and thought, well, this is it, time to end civilization as we know it. But Petrov? He trusted his gut. He didn't press the button, figuring it was probably just a glitch. Spoiler alert, it was a glitch. No missiles, no apocalypse. Just a glitch that could have ended the world. Classic 80s tech. Petrov saved the world that night by doing nothing. So the next time you're procrastinating, just remember, sometimes doing nothing is the best decision you'll ever make. As you can see, doomsday has lurked in the shadows on several occasions. But even back in 1947, some scientists and experts were already feeling the heat from the ever-present fallout of the atomic bomb. No pun intended. After all, who wouldn't worry about a little radioactive debris or, even worse, doomsday? The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists thought, let's quantify just how doomed we really are. They created the doomsday clock and set it to 7 minutes to midnight, which felt pretty ominous at the time. And now, we're lounging at a cozy 90 seconds to midnight, the closest we've ever been, so feel free to relax. Disaster is just a tick away. Now let's talk about the nuclear football, the president's very own doomsday on-demand briefcase. Think of it like the ultimate work laptop, except instead of PowerPoint slides, this unassuming black case contains everything the president needs to end the world. And it's never more than a few feet away from him. Wherever the president goes, the football goes. Golfing? It's there. Family vacation? Yep, right next to the sunscreen. Because, really, what's more reassuring than knowing the fate of humanity can be stashed in a carry-on? Now, let's wrap this up by taking a little trip back to the 1980s, the decade that brought us neon leg warmers, cassette tapes, and iconic movies like Ghostbusters and The Terminator. But amidst all the big hair and even bigger egos, we also had a rather interesting character stepping onto the scene, Roger Fisher. Fisher was an American professor at Harvard, known for his courses in negotiation and his unique approaches to conflict resolution. But let's just say he had one particularly unconventional idea that stood out. His big plan for avoiding nuclear war? Let's make it personal. Instead of letting the president just press a button from the safety of a bunker, Fisher proposed something a bit more intimate. The nuclear launch codes would be surgically implanted inside a human being. Yep, you heard that right, in their chest. So, if the president wanted to start a nuclear war, he'd first have to personally kill the code holder and dig the launch codes out of their body with a butcher's knife. His thinking? If the president had to, murder someone right in front of him to start a war, maybe he'd think twice, because apparently, "Are you sure you want to start World War III?" wasn't cutting it. A little messy, sure, but effective. Now, obviously, Fisher's idea never made it past the brainstorming phase. But let's be honest, wouldn't that make for an unforgettable scene in a spy movie? What title would you give such a movie? Personally, I'd lean towards The Heart of War or Implanted Destruction. Drop your suggestions in the comments below, and let's hope no one accidentally hits the wrong button before you've had time to push subscribe. Thanks for watching. If you had a laugh or learned something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more. It's free and helps keep the fun coming.